This is the My Child Will Thrive podcast, and I'm your host, Tara Hunkin, nutritional therapy practitioner, certified GAPS practitioner, restorative wellness practitioner, and mother. I'm thrilled to share with you the latest information, tips, resources, and tools to help you on the path to recovery for your child with ADHD, autism, sensory processing disorder, or learning disabilities. My own experiences with my daughter, combined with as much training as I can get my hands on, research I can dig into, and conferences I can attend, have helped me to develop systems and tools for parents like you who feel overwhelmed trying to help their children. So sit back as I share another great topic to help you on your journey. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Autism, ADHD, and Sensory Processing Disorder Summit. In order to learn more about the summit and to sign up for free, please go to www.mychildwillthrive.com/summit. I want to welcome today to the My Child Will Thrive podcast, Jessica Sherman. Jessica is the author of Raising Resilience, Take the Stress Out of Feeding Your Family and Love Your Life, 36 Ways to Help Your Kids Relax, Learn, and Grow, a title that every parent would love. So what I want to do is just dive in. Jess, can you give us a little background about how you got into nutrition and how you decided to go down this path?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Tara. I'm a nutritionist. I work with families mostly to help exactly that, take the stress out of feeding their family. I started getting interested in this actually when I was a teacher. Before being a nutritionist, I was a teacher for many, many years. And that's when, I worked with all kinds of kids, like straight A kids, privileged kids, underprivileged kids, like kids with struggles, special needs kids. And I just really, through teaching them, wanted to better understand how they function, like what makes kids tick, what makes some kids like do really well and thrive and other kids struggle. And then of course I became a mom. And then my interest got a little more heightened because I was like, how can I understand my kids a little bit better? For the kids who were struggling, there seemed to be kind of this funnel that they would go through, right? It's like we would try best we could as teachers to like shift the environment and connect with them and do what we could as teachers. But then it was like, if that doesn't work, then it's like they need a diagnosis, they need a doctor, they need a medication, there's something wrong with them. And they would go down this funnel, and it never really felt good to me. Because I felt like there was something we were missing, like we were blaming kids for things that were not their fault, like we were missing something. So that's when I left teaching, and I wanted to deepen my understanding of kids and their bodies. So I went and studied nutrition and holistic health. And that completely changed everything for me, because I started learning what a lot of your listeners now are starting to learn as well, or understand in the context of their kids, which is that the body and the brain are connected, right? And that the brain affects the body affects the brain, like it's one big thing. And so nutrition really matters. Nutrition, what's going on inside the body, what they're eating, how they feel, whether they're constipated, whether they have allergies, things like that seem to have nothing to do with the brain, are actually really affecting their behavior. And so that's now what I focus my energy on, is helping parents understand that they have this whole new toolbox available to them of improving the health of the body in order to improve how their kids function and think and feel. So, so that's what I do now.
Yeah, no, and it's amazing. It is funny when you say it, it seems so logical. The body affects the brain affects the body. But for a long, long time, that is not how the medical community has, at least the Western medical community, has looked at, behavioral challenges. And it's not how they're treating them right now.
Yeah, and what's kind of interesting to me is like when I look around, there's kind of this burgeoning understanding that the brain affects the body, right? Like stress affects heart disease or things like that is starting to be talked about a little bit more, but that it goes the other way, and that like infections in the gut can affect behavior, or things like that, or an allergy can affect behavior. That is still kind of like, what, really? And for myself too, I spent about 6 years saying like, really, really, and now having seen it over and over and over again, it's like, yeah, really.
I can second that, because it took me a long time when I first started out investigating these options for my child. To have that, I was saying the same thing. I always say that when I read Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride's book about GAPS, the GAPS diet, that I was like, there's just no way. There's just no way. And because it just seems so beyond that it could be that simple is not the right word, but that it was that simple. And you start to play common sense comes into it, then you start to realize that, and you understand how biologically and metabolically the body works, you start to see how this could be the case. So
yeah, I always wonder, like just having been working with kids for so long, I wonder, 10, 20 years from now, what we're going to look back and say, oh my God, like we did that, because we do that now, right? We look back 20 years ago, we're like, really? We told people that?
Yeah.
Because now we know different. But, it's an evolving process, and our understanding is changing and shifting almost daily now. And it takes time.
Yeah, it does. And I think like you, although we're out there looking for it all the time, we see how it's changing in terms of in mainstream. And for example, in the microbiome research that's coming out, and the mainstream medical books that are now coming out to support the impact of the gut on the brain, and vice versa. So we're getting there.
Getting there. Yeah. Interesting. So it would be like totally different.
Yeah. It's going to be great. So let's start talking a little bit about your book and some of the things that you discuss throughout your book. And one of the areas that you talk about is the environment, and how the environments and our lifestyle are impacting our children's behavior and brain and developmental challenges in some cases. So can you talk a little bit about that, and why you think they're contributing to the high rates of neurodevelopmental disorders?
Yeah, I think the reason, this word resilience, right? This is the word that I started to become interested in back when I was teaching. It's like raising resilience, and it's still being talked about a lot in the psychology world and in education and stuff. Resilience is really just our ability to handle stress. Right? So our ability to come back to center when we're in the face of an accumulation of stress. And so I think right now we're in this kind of perfect storm situation where our stresses are increased. We have more stresses than ever before. And at the same time, our ability to handle stress is diminished. And that has a lot to do with nutrition and our stress management responses and stuff like that. So we have this perfect storm going on, and the way that I suggest that we manage it is to identify those stressors best we can and reduce them, and then also boost our body's ability to handle stress. And my tool is food, so I do that through nutrition, making sure the nutrients are there to support all the hormones and the processes involved in stress management, right? So in the book, I break it down into 3 types of stressors. There's social stressors, which is all about our connection and understanding our place in the world. There's environmental stressors, the environment around us. And then there's these biological stressors, which are the things going on deep in the body that few people are talking about. They're often getting missed, right? The things like yeast and allergies and, dysbiosis and infection and things like that, these biological things. So that's how I suggest people break it down to take a look at your child, understand that if they're showing symptoms, whether it's a diagnosis or not, they're struggling to cope with stress. So how can you reduce their social, environmental, and biological stressors? And how can you feed them in a way that bolsters their little bodies so that they can better handle stress? Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense. Yeah. Can you give people examples of, you gave a couple examples of biological stressors. So what types of environmental stressors do you see your clients or maybe the kids that you taught being exposed to on a regular basis that parents can quickly identify if those are things they can. Environmental stressors, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say right off the bat, like my focus is the biological stressors. So, but environmental stuff, I mean, too much clutter, the colors, EMFs, like pollution in the home air environment. Obviously, like general pollution and what we're exposed to on a day-to-day basis. These things are much more heightened now than ever before, and honestly, we need to know more about their effect on the body. And I'm sure you have other podcasts.
I do. I have some coming up on those. So those are the environmental stressors, which we'll dive into. I have a guest coming on soon to talk about those. The other one that you talked about was social.
Social, yeah. And just on the environmental one, I would say also, and I learned this quite quickly as a teacher, just because I was kind of into, I don't know, somehow it just made sense to me as a teacher. But like just the space, like walk into a classroom and like things to look at and what's, and we have more of an understanding of this now, like some schools have sensory rooms or quiet rooms or, different ways of holding your body, sitting differently. Like that's all really cool stuff and really important. But okay, social stressors. So social stressors, they have, that has to do with our connection. I come to parenting and I come to relate the child development, I guess, from an attachment parenting kind of perspective. That's the lens that makes sense to me. And that really holds that we are creatures of attachment. We need connection in order to feel safe and secure. And kids who aren't feeling secure and safe in their connections tend to flail a little bit until they ground themselves. So that would be your connection with them, your time, the quality of their time, and the amount of your time that you spend with them, their ability to feel safe with you, and not even just with you as a parent, but other people in the community, their teachers, their caregivers. I've had a few clients who, parents are kind of struggling to cope with them, and so they place them in a home, and that home helped relieve the stress on the parents, but it was very stressful for the kids because they didn't feel connected, right? And so that's something for people to consider, not that they shouldn't be placing their kids, but that, something to ask about when you're looking for a place for your kids, if that's one of the things that you need. How do they feel about connection? What do they, that sort of thing. So that's sort of the social stuff. Causes a lot of stress for kids.
Yeah. Well, and I like your perspective on it. I think the attachment perspective is a different one than I've heard before in terms of social, environmental, or social space, I guess, and connection challenges that kids can have. So let's go back to the nutrition, because that is the area that you like to focus on, because you're a nutritionist. So what types of core strategies do you advise your clients to take when they're first getting started with nutrition for their children? Because that's usually the hardest part, is getting started, because it's so overwhelming. And that's why I love the title of your book, Taking the Stress Out of Feeding Your Family. I think even people with kids that don't have special needs find the stress, but as soon as we start to try to address their needs through diet, it's a challenge.
It is, and there's so much advice being thrown at you, right? Do this, don't do that, this superfood, that superfood. So yeah, I get it. It is overwhelming. I think one of the things when I first became a mom, my oldest kid right now is 10, and I have 3 of them. And when I first started parenting, I was like, I need a framework. Like I need a frame for what I'm doing here. Otherwise, I just feel like there's too much information, or I need a lens. Like I need some. So I think parenting really does force you to take a good look at your values and your core values and be like, okay, what fits into this? That's a bit of an aside. It doesn't really answer your question, but strategy, this is what I'm getting at, is like core strategies. I needed to find structure. I needed to find systems. make sense of all of the advice that I was being given. So I could be like, yes, I'm going to take that advice. No, I'm not going to take that advice. And I think we all have to do that. So like I say, it was like 6 years of me going, really, what? And looking at the research and going to conferences and working with people. And so I boiled it all down to 4 things. Good. My structure. 4 things. And I call them the 4 pillars. Sometimes I call them 4 strategies. And I write about them in the book. In the book, I talk about it a little bit differently, but it's the same 4 things. One is that we have to understand that food can cause irritation, right? So back to like that stress management model, we're trying to reduce stressors and we're trying to improve the body's ability to handle stress. That's what resilience is all about. Food can cause a lot of stress in the body. So when people say, oh, additives don't matter, the occasional, junk doesn't matter, the whatever, sugar doesn't matter, right? They look at research studies and say, oh, look, there's no link between sugar and ADHD or whatever, right? And I say, like, zoom out a minute. This stuff causes stress on the body. And our whole job here is to remove stress from the body. Your kid's struggling, right? So yes, it matters. So that's the core pillar number 1, or this strategy number 1, is that understand that food can cause irritation. It really matters to clean things up and take out the junk. And then on a deeper level to figure out if there's any allergies and things like that. What's the irritation? And then the other 3 are really focused around that nourishing the body piece, like helping the body cope with stress. One is to just flood the body with nutrients. Like, our body is built with nutrients. So understand which foods you can really pack a punch in terms of nutrition, and use supplements to fill the gaps. The second one, or the third one I guess we're on, is blood sugar, keeping blood sugar stable. When blood sugar goes, we've all experienced this, right? And this is one of the first examples when people don't understand that the body affects the brain. Like, have you ever been hangry? We've all been hangry, right? Your blood sugar drops, you feel like crap. Case closed, right?
Exactly.
Your brain. So blood sugar matters. And then digestion is the other piece. That, figuring out the whole, whether there's yeast, whether there's constipation. Constipation is a big one.
Yeah. That is one that comes up quite a lot. And I think the big thing is that without addressing digestion, you can be putting in a whole lot of nutrients into their body, but they aren't getting as many as they could be from all the work that you're doing. So I love that 4th pillar. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's kind of conceptual, right? But in the book, I break it down into, well, how do you get the nutrients in? How do you do the blood sugar, right? So there's lots more we could talk about, but on a framework side of things, when you're trying to choose what advice you're going to take and what advice you're not going to take, what does it fit into one of those 4 things? And if it does, then really consider it.
Yeah, no, I like that. One of the biggest challenges, I think you probably get this from your clients. I know I have, and I get a lot of emails about it. What to do when your child's a really picky eater, if you're trying to get more nutrients into them and they're only wanting, and usually with our kids, it's the carbs. So they only want the mac and cheese, the carb and the dairy, and they only want those things. But yet we're in a lot of instances asking, well, one, that's not good for blood sugar, as you and I both know. So it's not going to do that. It's not good for nutrient density either. And often is not good for the allergies that they're dealing with. So what do you say to parents who have picky eaters and how to get to the next level?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Tara, because a lot of people throw up their hands. They're like, okay, cool, food's a tool, awesome, but my kid only eats 2 things. So how am I going to make use of this tool, right? So picky eating, the first thing I'd say about picky eating is that it's a behavior, right? And behaviors come from somewhere. Like, they don't just pop out of nowhere. Like, behaviors are triggered by something. And so with picky eating, like with any behavior, you have to figure out what's triggering it, and then come up with a resolution strategy that matches the trigger. So what triggers picky eating? Well, it could be a lot of things. It could be something social, right? It could be I come back to the same core strategies. It could be social, power dynamic kind of stuff. control stuff. It could be nutritional. There's some nutritional deficiencies that really influence how we taste things, our hunger cues, our satiety cues, our digestion. And it could be digestive. It could be things that aren't feeling good when they're going down, and so a kid doesn't want to eat it. Or there's yeast in the gut that's craving the yeast that are craving the sugar, not the kid, right? Yeah. So once you kind of understand behaviors always come from somewhere, then anything your kid throws at you, your next question is, what's going on, right? What is going on with this behavior? Where is it coming from? And then you can break it down and try and figure out where it's coming from and what you can do about it. And then the other part to picky eating, and there's a whole section in the book about picky eating because it's such a big deal. It's one of the biggest roadblocks for parents, right? Like if you're going to deal with biological stressors, there's 3 big roadblocks. One is picky eating, one is constipation, and one is sleep issues. If you can't get your kid to sleep, eat, and poop, that's where you just like drop everything and focus on those 3 things.
Yeah.
Right?
It's exactly it. I mean, we can talk a little bit more about sleep in a minute too, because that is a really big thing. So
yeah. So with the picky eaters, I come back to one of the things we used to talk about in teaching was edge work. We would call it edge work because the kind of teaching that I did was very experiential, very hands-on, very just experiential education. But so if this is your comfort zone and you want to expand the comfort zone, the place where the work is right at the edge there. Right? So
on the edge of a big edge of a circle for those that are listening and not watching.
Right, on the edge of the circle. So if your kid is constantly in their comfort zone is mac and cheese all the time, every day, that's their comfort zone. You're not going to be able to expand that until you work the edge, right? And expand their boundaries a little bit without freaking them out, right? So you take that mac and cheese and you improve the nutritional density of it a little bit. And if you have sensory kids, then you want to be careful, like the color stays the same. Maybe you use pumpkin instead of cheddar cheese, or or the texture starts to stay the same. And you do one thing at a time. You change one sensory thing at a time. And you can do a lot with mac and cheese. I did a little Facebook Live on the mac and cheese that I make now is so out of control. Because my kids are used to this, right? I keep working the edge. Yeah. But I mean, the cheese that I put on my mac and cheese is not cheese at all. It's not cheese at all. It's cashews and it's Jerusalem artichoke and it's what else? Cauliflower and it's all kinds of things in there. Pine nuts, things that make it a little bit more nutritionally dense, but it still seems kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
And you're not going to go from like Kraft mac and cheese to that right off the bat. You're going to work the edge until you get to that. But I guess my take home about picky eaters is that it's a thing, it's a deal, it's something to deal with. It's a big roadblock, and it comes from somewhere, and you got to figure out where it comes from.
Yeah, and I mean, there's good examples like you talked about. In terms of some of the things that it comes from, it could be taste. And so I know in the book you work through a number of those things, but the taste thing could be as simple as a zinc deficiency. So they're not tasting the food the way they should be because it doesn't taste like much to them because they don't have that. So it is amazing. Sometimes it's a simple switch that can make a big difference. And sometimes it's more complicated or it could be very layered.
Yeah, zinc is a big deal, and it's something I use a lot of. Is zinc and digestive enzymes as well. That whole thing about food making them not feel good is really big, because if you have an early experience with a food that doesn't make you feel good, you're never going to want to touch it, and you might not even know why. Yeah. Right? Because it was an experience that you had as a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. So there's shifting that internal stuff. So the taste change and the digestion changes, but then there's the social, there's the fear and the anxiety around the food that you need to work through as well. And really, being really supportive.
Yeah. So one of the other things that you talked about in terms of big issues for these kids is constipation. So I don't want to not talk about that because it's a huge problem. It's a question that comes up all the time. So what do you tell clients that you have about the importance of resolving it, and maybe some broad steps as to what you start to investigate as to the root cause of the constipation in the first place?
That's a big question. We could talk about that for hours.
We could.
In terms of why it's important to relieve, really it's as simple as the bowels are one of our main and our preferred exit route, right? For waste and toxins and hormones and everything your body doesn't need. So you can't block that up. If it's blocked up, then the body is going to have an increased stress load. So back to that stress management, right? Their stress load is going up, because they're not flushing it. So that's kind of why it's important to get rid of constipation. In terms of what causes it, gosh, it could be so many different things. I love working with osteopaths and occupational therapists, because they get the body moving and they work on the sphincters and work on that whole, and chiropractors too as well. That whole, like, just getting
the motility back.
Hands on, right? And then nutritionally, it could be digestion's backed up, right? So there could be nutritional deficiencies. Zinc, again, really important for stomach acid. So if stomach acid is low, there's a whole cascade of effects, right? The enzymes aren't produced, the pancreas isn't stimulated, the bile isn't stimulated, so digestion just gets backed up. So, and this is always often a problem. I have a lot of kids who come and they're on antacids and things like that, right? So they have reflux, and so they've been given this stomach acid suppressors, and when stomach acid is too low, digestion is going to back up. So that could be a big thing. Food allergies and irritation to the intestine, that can be a problem, or a root cause, I guess.
Now the list is long, for sure.
Nutritional deficiencies, like magnesium, is really helpful to soften the bowels and to bring water into the colon. The mucosa, if it's irritated, the process doesn't work as well. So yeah, it's a big long list.
It is a big long list. Now, the other thing that you did, well, actually, you know what? We'll circle back to sleep in a minute. So what I want to do is talk about how you recommend parents, so that they've got a picky, they're working those edges like you've talked about, but what are the top tips that you have for someone who's helping their child now transition to this new lifestyle? I mean, you've talked about tiny steps with the picky eaters, but what else do you recommend to your clients as they're transitioning?
Again, like, you need a structure, right? You need a system. You got to stay systematic. Otherwise you will drive yourself totally batty, right? And what I tell people is that they've got 3 bank accounts that they have to consider. They've got their time, they've got their money, and they've got their energy as parents, right? And if you don't consider the status of your 3 bank accounts, and you move too quickly, too fast, and you go in the red in one or several of them, you will stay overwhelmed, you'll spin your wheels, your kid will still struggle, you'll feel guilty, like it's just this cyclone of yuck, right? Yeah. So I caution parents. I was like, if you're moving from Kraft macaroni and cheese and a dairy addiction to like the macaroni and cheese I did on my Facebook Live, you can do that, but it's going to take a lot of energy, and it's going to take a lot of time, and it's a bigger jump, right? But if you work the edges slowly and work within your bank accounts, you'll see a slower progressive change, but you'll see change happen and you'll feel more successful. So I sometimes think, I don't know if it was Mike, I got to look this quote up, but I don't know if it was Michelangelo who talked about chipping away at the stone to find the sculpture inside. Was that him? I think maybe it was him.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Anyway,
but I get the analogy for sure.
The analogy, I think it works, right? That's how I feel about change. It's like you've got your child, they're stuck in this big mountain of brick or stone, marble, let's call it marble. And you're chipping away, and you're chipping away, and you're doing what seems reasonable for you and at a pace that feels good for you. And then eventually you'll find them there.
Yeah, no, I think it is important to be patient. I mean, a lot of us get really caught up in the new and the latest thing that we hear about, and having that patience to just keep on slowly doing it, because it really is a layered effect.
Yeah, and keeping that big picture in mind, you're trying to reduce stress and bolster the body's ability to handle stress. And I think of like I call it the low-hanging fruit trifecta, but not in any way meaning to demean how difficult it can be. But sugar, chemicals, and sleep are the first things to deal with. And sometimes it takes months to get your kid to have less sugar and eat, have more sleep and have fewer chemicals. But if you jump from there to like the GAPS diet or something like that, sometimes those things are missed, right? It's like, well, you still have chemicals in the home and you still have your kid's still not sleeping. And so, yeah, you're on this, very highly restrictive diet, which should help because of the irritation thing. But there's some other things that were a lot simpler to do that should have been done first, or that you would be serving your kid better to deal with first, and they take less energy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The foundational items that you need to address. It also helps when you start to go to the next level with more advanced strategies. If you've got the foundational stuff in place, you're going to see better results faster than if you don't do those things. Those foundational things like sleep. And another one I like to talk about is hydration, because without a properly hydrated body and cell, we again struggle to get those nutrients into the cell and make a big difference. But let's talk about sleep, because this keeps coming up. So and again, like constipation, sleep is a huge challenge for a lot of parents with their kids. So and I think that a lot of people, although obviously sleep makes us tired, we don't all understand. I certainly didn't before I studied it, what the biochemical impact of the lack of sleep does in terms of things like even blood sugar management. So it has a spiral effect and other things. So can you just touch on that for a little bit?
Yeah. So sleep is like critical, right? Sleep is when your hormones reset. It's when you detoxify. It's when you regenerate. In terms of your ability to handle stress, right? Back to that teeter-totter thing. You need your sleep. And we've all felt that again, right? We've all felt when you have a crappy sleep, you're anxious and irritable the next day, right? Because you didn't have that reset. In terms of what to do about it, there's a few things that I see quite commonly. The first is blood sugar management. So back to like those 4 pillars, that pillar of blood sugar management is really important for good sleep, because again, sleep is partly about hormones, blood sugar is partly about hormones. So as a nutritionist, like my dietary tool for hormone management, like I don't do bioidentical hormones, I don't do like any kind of hormone therapy. My tool for hormones is blood sugar. Because when you influence that master hormone, insulin, it starts a cascade. Hormones are always talking to each other, right? So, and do you want to get into like how to do that?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, we could be here for hours. Yeah. But the biggest, I guess I would say the biggest thing to just take home message is that breakfast really matters. It really matters. If your kid's not sleeping at night, they can't settle, they're like hyper wired at night. I see that quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Back it up to how they're eating throughout the day. And I see this very common picture of they wake up grumpy, they're not hungry. You can maybe get a piece of toast in them or a bowl of cereal or like something, but it's usually carbohydrate. They may or may not eat lunch when they're at school. Like it's kind of crazy time and no one's checking, or they can't settle or whatever. Lunch comes home not eaten. They're tired in the middle of the afternoon. Then they get wired at night. That's a very common sort of pattern that responds well to eating for better blood sugar control. So having a breakfast that is higher in fiber, higher in fat, higher in protein. Hard to do when you have a picky eater, I get it, but it's something to work towards. And then, finding some strategies so that they eat their lunch. Sometimes I tell parents, like, you have to have a conversation with the lunch monitors, like your kid needs support, put little stickers on their little lunch things. Like, there's strategies around how to get them to eat lunch. And if they're really not eating lunch, then making sure they have a solid afternoon snack when they get home from school that is full of fiber, full of fat, full of protein. And then see where that gets you in terms of their ability to sleep. That's the first strategy I see help quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously blood sugar management has a huge impact on many things. So I think those are all really great strategies. You both know that there's lots of different things you can do for sleep in terms of, tricks like Epsom salt baths, as they, in the evenings. Some people use magnesium on the feet and
calming teas like and chamomile tea, and having a good bedtime ritual and a routine, making sure there's good sleep hygiene, so it's blackened and they're comfortable, safe, secure. All of those things are really, really, really important.
Yeah, they are really important. Can you maybe, before we go, just talk about, two things. One, maybe give an example of a client that you've worked with where you had great success, and how your method of looking at the 4 pillars and doing those things can impact a family when they have support like that.
Yeah, I mean, they're always so different. They're always such, parents will come usually feeling pretty overwhelmed and pretty like, I read this and should I do this and that, I need to do this, or we just got a diagnosis, or we're just waiting for a report to come back and stuff like that. And it's a very chaotic time. My first caution would be calm down and watch your kid. Like, this whole process, the stuff that you and I talk about so much is about tuning into your kid, right? Okay, like, don't worry about anybody else's kid. We got to tune into your kid and figure out what's stressing them out and why they can't cope with that stress, right? So I talk about a little girl I work with, Maggie, quite a bit. I talk about her a lot in my webinars, and I use her as an example because I think she was 7 when she came to see me, and that was her mom, right? Her mom was kind of panicked. She was having panic attacks at school. She had this explosive behavior. She didn't have a diagnosis. I work with a lot of kids that do have diagnoses, but she didn't have a diagnosis yet. She reached out for help, and she was offered Prozac, and she was, and her daughter was going through that, that funnel of, you can't participate, her friends didn't want to be her friends anymore, you can't, stay inside for recess, you can't be out on the yard because you're being too aggressive. And then of course the looking, maybe you need a diagnosis, there's something wrong with you, maybe you need a medication, there's something wrong with you. So she was kind of going down that funnel, and her mom was kind of panicked because she didn't want to medicate her kid, but she didn't know, like, maybe I should, maybe this is, and I'm not against medication, but her mom was panicked because of this. So she was a really good case of, she had all the biological stressors, she was, she had food sensitivity. She was addicted to milk, which is something I see a lot. All she wanted to eat was yogurt and cheese and ice cream. And also addicted to sugar, craving sugar. So her diet was pretty abysmal, and her mom was like, well, she's just picky. And so we did a lot of, pickiness comes from somewhere, like the whole Edgeworth thing. So she had a lot of irritation going on. She was a picky eater, so there were definitely some nutritional deficiencies when I looked at her diet. So we used some supplements for that. Blood sugar, she had that thing that that pattern that I just described of potential blood sugar dysregulation. So, we got a smoothie into her in the morning. We had after school snacks. We worked on strategies for blood sugar. And then she was actually working with an integrative doctor as well that I set her up with. And he found yeast and Clostridia in the gut, and she was very constipated. So on all 4 levels, on all 4 of those pillars, she was struggling and she had a lot of biological stress. And so we relieved that for her and things got better. And I want to be clear, like she's still a high maintenance kid. She'll probably always be a high maintenance kid. And there's probably some genetic factors going on that influence that. But they could support her once her stress load came down and she could manage her stress a little bit better. They could help talk her through panic attacks and they were less frequent. And her, she still had outbursts, but they were less aggressive and less explosive. And so, at age 7 and 8, she was learning how to handle herself a little bit better because these biological stressors had been uprooted.
Yeah. I think what's so great about that is a couple things. Is it, aside from obviously pointing out again how those biological stressors are affecting the brain, but also any improvement is a pretty big improvement to a parent and also the teachers and everything that are trying to work with. So if you can get that improvement by doing these things, that's a huge thing for the child as well. But also, fundamentally, her health was out of balance. So her biological health, and we don't want a child at the age of 7 to be sick like that and then continue on. So it's not just about the behavioral changes and everything. So to correct those biological imbalances impacts the whole health of the body as she grows as well.
Yeah, so. And I think that's really, really key, right? What you just said, and you put it so nicely, that we want healthy kids. We want our kids to be as healthy as they can. And when they have certain behaviors, it's a clue for us. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, we need to tweak something. And we can improve the health of the body in order to shift that. So really tuning into these red flags and understanding that they're contributors, right? Like constipation, picky eating, like they're red flags. They're like, oh, we need to go a different direction.
Yeah, no, it really makes such a big difference long-term on their health. And I think that's when I get frustrated in terms of people not looking for the root causes, or that for the Western medicine not wanting to accept that might be the case, is that in the end, as parents and as practitioners, we're just looking to take their health to the next level. And there's some happy consequences across the board typically for that as well.
Yeah, I really don't. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I really, when people come to see me, I'm quite clear that like, I'm not about the goal. Like the goal is not necessarily recovery or diagnosis reversal. Like that would be nice, but our goal is improved health, right? And that's what I love about nutrition. It's like you can't go wrong with nutrition because it will always improve. As you improve nutrition, you improve the health of the body. And if we get a reversal of diagnosis, that's freaking awesome. But let's take it one step at a time and tune in to your kid. What are they telling you about their stress? And how can we help them?
Yeah. Well, and what I was going to do was ask you if there's one thing you want parents to take away from today, what it is, but I think you just said it. So,
I think I just said it.
Yeah, you've covered that off. So before we go, what I want to know is I will be linking to all of your website and to your book and everything in the show notes for today. But where can parents find you? That the ones that are listening, if they don't go online, where do they find you, and how can they work with you?
So I work in Ottawa, in Ontario. Nice. That's where my business is, at the Ottawa Integrative Health Center right now. Who knows when you're listening to this, if I'm still there. But I also have a virtual office as well. So you can always find me through my website. I work with people all over the world through video conference. And you can find out about me at my website, justsherman.com. And then I also have online programs as well, which is a really lovely way to enter into community around this, as your listeners have experienced probably. You need to surround yourself with people who get this, you guys, because not everyone gets that the health of the body can influence the health of the brain. It's still a like burgeoning concept. And so you got to surround yourself with those people. And that's what my group programs do. Help you walk through this process surrounded by the parents who are also going through this process. So all of that is on my website, and my book is listed there as well. Raisingresilience.ca is where you can find my book.
That's amazing. Well, and I as I've mentioned to you, Jess, before we got started today, one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, where do I find someone to work with? So I am always really excited to have someone on the podcast that is taking clients and working with people on a daily basis, because we all need help. As I said to you, I like working with other practitioners to help me with my children, my family, because we need that other perspective. And we also need the community of people that understand where we're coming from, and can help talk us off the ledge when things aren't going so well.
That's right.
Just as much as to celebrate our successes when things are going well as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming and joining us today. And I'm sure we'll be talking again in the future. And I encourage everybody to get out when they're stopped listening to this, that they come to the show notes, and there's lots of links to Jess's site and her book and everything else, and seek out further help from Jess moving forward. If you've enjoyed today's interview with Jess, I encourage you to sign up for the Autism, ADHD, and Sensory Processing Disorder Summit. Jess will be joining us there, where I'll interview her more about her expertise and using diet and nutrition to help your child. You can sign up for the summit for free at www.mychildwillthrive.com/summit. My Child Will Thrive is not a substitute for working with a qualified healthcare practitioner. The information provided on this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat your child. Please consult your healthcare practitioner before implementing any information or treatments that you have learned about on this podcast. There are many gifted, passionate, and knowledgeable practitioners with hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of study and clinical experience available to help guide you. Part of our goal is to give you the knowledge and tools you'll need to effectively advocate for your child, so that you don't blindly implement each new treatment that comes along. No one knows your child better than you. No one knows your child's history like you do, or can better judge what is normal or abnormal for your child. The greatest success in recovery comes from the parent being informed and asking the right questions, and making the best decisions for their child in coordination with a team of qualified practitioners in different areas of specialty. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining me this week on the My Child Will Thrive podcast. I want to share with you the free tools I've created to help you on your journey. So head to mychildwillthrive.com/library to get free access now. And as they say, it takes a village. Join us in the My Child Will Thrive Village Facebook group, where you can meet like-minded parents and stay up to date on everything we have going on at My Child Will Thrive. This is Tara Hunkin, and I'll catch you on the next podcast or over at mychildwillthrive.com.